Now we'll begin ancient Greece and the Golden Age and take a look at the philosophers and writers. But a quick side point I wanted to point out is there's where Greek people lived, settlements. This is ancient Greece. And these would be the cities, and each of them basically acting as their own country, city-states, state being equivalent to its own country in a lot of ways. So this is all Greece, and these are their own little city-states. If Athens and Miletus and Ephesus, Knossos, Sparta, Argos. Now the major temples, Delphi, Olympia, Delos. Now, there was times where wars broke out, and one of them was the Peloponnesian War, and when it ended, a certain character came into play. So over in philosophers and writers of the Golden Age, first was the Cosmologists. Notice your Pythagorean triangle down here for later foreshadowing. First, the cosmologists, lovers of wisdom. Sophie, wisdom. Philo is like or love. So they really liked the wisdom. So anyone who has this as their center of thought and action is a philosopher, a lover of wisdom. They studied reality and the human existence, elemental parts, things of that nature. Anything they had a large category, and they philosophized about it. They thought the ideal part of reality, they thought a lot of reality was run on numbers, as in mathematics. So when mathematics were connected to nature, they were looking for the ideals in nature. Cosmologist, one who studies origins, nature, the cosmos, for example. Pythagoras was a philosopher, and he developed the mathematical explanation. So he was developing how to connect what they thought as perfect mathematics and how that would explain the origin of the cosmos or universe. So Pythagoras is technically a cosmologist. Philosophers, Thrace and Democritus. Now these two actually developed a philosophical explanation of the nature of the universe. They theorized that all matter is made up of the smallest particles. So everything is made up of the smallest particles. And they call those atoms. They kind of philosophically came up with this as if there's a piece of matter or a substance, there's a piece of something, you could divide it in two. And each of those halves, you could divide that in two. And you could divide that in half, and divide that in half, and divide that in half, until you come to a point where you can no longer split it in half. Atoms cannot be split. So that, and then they just name it atoms. That's the smallest bit. So the atomic theory actually goes all the way back to ancient Greece and Democritus and Thrace. Socrates. Now he lived from 470 to 399 BC in Athens. So he only made it to 31 years old. And there's a reason why he died that age. Infantry soldier in the Peloponnesian War. That's right. Socrates was a veteran of the Peloponnesian War, so he was a crusty type of toughen. One of the history's greatest thinkers and teachers. Everybody sort of gets that one. One of his biggest mottos was know thyself. Self-reflection. Like reflecting on the inner workings of your thoughts, your feelings, your spirit, where you're going, what you're doing. Know thyself. And to flip that coin, evil or bad wrong or bad living, evil comes from ignorance. Now, this is true in so many ways. 2,500 years later, people think for themselves. He wanted people to do that. Think for yourselves. Achieve wisdom. And then you'll live right. And that turns into actually the development of morals and ethics. They just called it living right. But you think for yourselves. Know thyself. Socrates. Let's take a look at Socrates again. Interesting looking character for 31. One of his famous quotes is the unexamined life is not worth living. Meaning, if you really want to put some worth into your life, know thyself. He would teach with large groups in a discussion called the Socratic method. Basically, his large groups were called symposiums, and that's where you get the modern symposium from. But it was just a group of people. They would go over to someone's place. They would lie around, Greek style, with the lay down and eat and drink, and they would talk and drink and eat and talk until, late into the wee hours. The Socratic method is he'd come up with a question. What is love? What is truth? What is this? What is that? And everybody would chime in what their thoughts were. And sometimes there's retorts and it's back and forth, and that's your symposium using the Socratic method. Asking questions. Basically sort of like group discussion. Yes, Socrates made a lot of enemies. He was critical and distrustful of the sophists. The sophists were a very popular school of thought or school of philosophy. The sophists, well, they have some good stuff, and it was common, and everybody kind of joined. It was like a big social club. These schools of thought were like a giant. So everyone, are you a socialist? I'm a socialist. Are you a sophist? I'm a sophist. Are you this or that? They were like large social groups. So the sophists were pursuing wisdom, but sometimes they got so wordy and so complicated and convoluted that they would just talk, say all kinds of stuff and not really get to the point. So even though the sophists got big, he just made all kinds of criticisms and he didn't trust a lot of them. So he made these officials, part of the sophist groups would be officials. They made officials look foolish. And he's accused of not honoring the gods, disproving or belittling their importance. So when a volcano would shake and make an earthquake or erupt and emit smoke, everyone else is saying, go to the temple and give offering to Zeus or god or goddess of volcano. And everyone would rush and, panicky, doing this kind of thing. And Socrates is saying, you gotta look at what makes that big mountain blow up? Where's this lava heat coming from? It's not the gods, it's from nature. So he was putting a lot of emphasis on examining nature and natural causes and diminishing the importance of just temple worship and temple belonging. So he made a lot of enemies. And they offered him the hemlock, and I think he made one defiant more speech, and he was basically sentenced to death for it. He was brought to trial for impiety, not being loyal. That would be not loyal, not loyal to the gods, and corrupting the youth, as in teaching them to think for themselves. And now there's a whole bunch of youngins and 20-somethings, and they're breaking away from the conventional, perhaps the sophists. And he was challenging them to think for themselves, and they did not like this stuff. He was found guilty, given the death sentence, and he drinks the poison hemlock. And he most likely did it defiantly. You drink this, of course I'll drink this, and he was gone. That's Socrates. Plato. Yeah, he's an interesting character. He was a student of Socrates. Probably one of many, but he was the one that really stands out. And why he stands out is he wrote down, and the writings of Plato are all that we know of Socrates. If it wasn't Plato writing down in his writings, I don't know if they would be called books, but if he wasn't writing things down, we wouldn't know anything about Socrates. Plato also created the Academy. Now, it's a more official version of school of thought. It's a school of philosophy, but Academy was, you go there and you're going to learn one of these philosophies, or you're going to go there and you're going to delve into a certain type of wisdom. His dialogues, that's what they call his writings, dialogues. The reason being is Socrates is the main character, asking his Socratic questions named after him. So Socrates is asking the questions, people are giving answers, he's asking questions back, and so it's a dialogue. And Plato has a very famous analogy called the cave, in which people are huddled inside of a cave. They're in the dark, and all they know about the world is shadows on the wall. There's this great lamp inside the cave, and back here people are putting up these rather much a puppet show. So the puppet show is illuminated on these shadows against the wall, and all the masses see are these shadows on the wall, which are these puppets, and they're orchestrated by a puppeteer group, until philosophers will come in and say, hey, grab one of these, come out of the cave and out into the light. And when they go out of the cave and into the light, they see all that's reality and great bright light. There's a sort of enlightenment theme there, and also sort of like a political criticism there. What people tell you and what you believe secondhand, I don't know. There's all kinds of things you can take out of Plato's allegory of the cave. Another thing about Plato, he asks Socrates, what is justice? Plato writes, the Republic. Or actually, Socrates asked, what is justice? Plato writes one of his famous books, the dialogue of describing optimum government, the Republic, Plato's Republic. And he's describing what the best government is. He says it's an aristocracy, government ruled by upper class. Aristocracy, he says, is the best government. But note aristocracy here is described as an upper class of philosophers, an upper class of wealthy, upper class of philosophers. They have wealth in wisdom, justice ideas, and a place, justice ideals in the place of wealth. To Socrates' question, what is justice? Plato's right in the Republic. Oh, I'm going backward. There we go. Aristotle. Moving forward. Aristotle is a student at the academy. So in a sense, Aristotle is a student of Plato in that way. He founded his own school in 335 BC. Now, Aristotle collected facts and observations, then refined them into classifications. Another way of saying that, categories. And this is the foundation of modern science. A good example of that is taxonomy. Taxonomy is classifications of animal kingdom, plant kingdom, etc. And under the animal kingdom, there's primates, there's tortoises with shells, there's mammals with fur, there's fish with scales, and under the floral category, there's trees, and there's pine cones, and there's willow. There's classified, and they're classified under types and shapes and stuff. I think it's more and more refined. But there's other places where facts and observations are refined into classifications. And this categorization is the foundation of modern science, from Aristotle. He examined almost every field of knowledge that he could get his mitts on. His portrayal of the academy, I think this is done by Raphael in the Renaissance time. And Raphael was a contemporary of Leonardo da Vinci. That's why I think you see Plato and Aristotle. I'm not sure, but one of these two characters right here is either Aristotle or Plato, and it resembles Leonardo da Vinci. Aristotle, in Ethics, back 2,000 years earlier from the Renaissance, in Ethics, he looks at the human nature for acts and belief achieving greatest happiness. Now, his ethics, he starts off with human nature, and the end result is what things does a person believe, and what things does a person do that actually achieves the greatest happiness. So if you look at ethics, guess who also read these books? Thomas Jefferson. So from ethics, you're looking at the pursuit of happiness. From the Republic, you're looking at other intrusions into our U.S. Constitution. So here's, I think, is ethics. This must be Aristotle, and this must be Plato. And notice how Plato's looking a little like Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, Aristotle. He believed in balance, order, and restraint, or basically self-control. Remember, harmony, balance, self-control, and human behavior. Politics is another book. Now, these are really getting into books. He philosophizes the best form of government. This is Aristotle's best form of government. And his conclusion was the best form of government was one that results in a large middle class. So if your middle class is big and thick, you're going good with your best form of government. If your middle class is waning or becoming small, something's wrong with the government. Aristotle, again, politics describes monarchy. So he describes monarchy, democracy, and aristocracy. They're all good. Monarchy, democracy, aristocracy. They're good. Yet, all three deteriorate into a bad form over time. monarchy goes into tyranny, democracy goes into anarchy, aristocracy goes into oligarchy. Okay, balance of good points of all three was the best. Balance of the good points of all three. Limited democracy. He comes up with Doctrine of the Means, which is basically about moderation. And it's like doctrine is teaching, means is, averaging. So it's like kind of more like the middle road, very kind of Buddhist in a way. Too much or too less of anything is bad. Mathematics and science. Pythagoras. Pythagoras comes up with the famous triangular theorem. Now, this guy is an interesting character, but for sure he was inspired by his trips to Egypt. Not just about triangle and pyramid, which he saw, but the form of architecture which developed the pyramid, and Pythagoras applying mathematics to basically describe and observe things. But the theorem is a famous theorem. It's all very high school. And if you add the two sides, which were right by the right triangle, and you square them, and you add them together, it equals the square of the hypotenuse, the long end. Squared, of course, And Hippocrates, another fellow who says disease was from natural causes, not punishment from the gods, or superstition oriented. So Hippocrates was definitely following along the lines of Socrates as finding natural causes, not just going to Mount Olympus on a whim. And here we have Pythagoras' hypotenuse. The two sides are on the right angle. This one squared equals that one squared. History. Greeks first to take history writing as very significant because they're into reality. So if you're writing down the truth and documenting the truth, you start developing what's known as history. And they thought it very important. Herodotus separated facts. He was told from secondhand. Okay, so secondhand knowledge and direct facts. Those are two different things. We get to honor Herodotus for that. From the facts he observed in person, he's known as the father of history. Just the facts. Greek drama. Now they're the first to write dramas. They had plays with action and dialogue with emotion. And there was a conflict and a resolution. There is a tragedy where everyone dies and the problem is still there. There's a comedy where everyone lives and the problem is solved. And there's a chorus, a side stage, but a little group, and they would sing little explanations to the audience, and that would help them understand what was going on. And the outdoor theater, or the stone amphitheater, is where they were held. And there was not Socrates, Sophocles. Sophocles was a Greek playwright, and they had, during the summer, they would have contests, and he was the one who won the drama writer, playwright, and he won. Sophocles. Sophocles is the one who wrote Oedipus Rex and the subsequent Oedipus books. They really had a great catharsis, and of course those Oedipus books were later read by Freud and such, and he was putting his theories using those ancient plays. The main problem that they explore in ancient Greek tragedies is conceited pride. Not really so much pride, because they liked pride, but conceited pride, that sort of corrupted pride. And that was the cause of most of the tragic demises of